Hello learners, welcome to our session today. I'm your instructor, CPA ARINGO FREDRICK. So in our class today, my good student, I want us to talk of a very important concept, not only in our syllabus, but also this concept is very practical. And at times, many people will find it hard to differentiate between these terms. Whenever we are talking of authority, responsibility, and power. This is a concept that I want us to study today. You'll find it to be very, very enjoyable. And remember, our theme or term it as our drive is usually will always aspire to grasp the concept rather than to cram. As much as people might say that this is theory, if I just take my book and go through it and understand and maybe cram for the purpose of passing exams, that should not be approach. That shouldn't be an approach at all. Whenever we are handling these such concepts, it will always be upon us to have an open mind. Let us always try to think beyond the four walls. Let us always try to think like managers, and you'll find these concepts will be very, very easy for us. It will be very, very easy for us. So looking at authority, responsibility, and power, ideally what do we mean? So to start, I want us to look, first of all, we start with authority. Authority. I know probably it's not the first time we are seeing this word authority. What can you relate authority to? Maybe in your work environment, probably there, you'll always be told that managers authority over you. Maybe when you're looking at it in regard to say like defense forces, you'll always be told that, of course, the seniors talk of the high rank individuals, they have authority over the lower rank individuals. So also normally being told that that is, of course, we're always being told, probably for those cases where we are being told that our parents probably have authority over us. God has authority over us. So what is this authority that you're talking about? Ideally, what is that authority that you are talking about now? So authority, you'll find that it will come with aspect of commanding, right? It will come with a concept of commanding. That is all about authority, right? So in simple terms, you normally say authority as a legal and formal right of the manager. Now we are looking at it in the environment of management. Remember, we are looking at it in the environment of management. We normally say that authority is a legal and formal right of the manager or supervisor or any of the top level executives of the organization to command subordinates, give them orders, instructions, and directions, and access obedience. Kindly allow me to repeat this beautiful definition of authority. We are saying that this is a legal and formal right of the manager or supervisor or any of the top level executives of the organization to command subordinates, give them orders, instructions, and directions, and access obedience. Meaning that always, whenever I'm being directed by person who is a senior to me in the organization, I must adhere to that, and that is a command that I'm given, and in such, that is what you're terming it as what? Authority. The manager is entitled to make decisions concerning performance and non-performance of a task in a particular manner, so as to accomplish organizational objectives, so as to accomplish organizational objectives. So you'll find that in this case, the whole idea of authority, just as we mentioned, you'll find that is kind of that ability of a senior manager or of a senior person or of a person who is above your rank to give you directions and do what? And adhere to the same. This is what you're terming it as what? Authority. A very key concept that you must always not probably tend to mix with what? With power. With power. Now, that was authority. A very simple definition of authority. A good student will ask, Mwalimu, what are the types of authority that you normally have? What are the types of authority that you normally have? So looking at the types of authority, looking at the types of authority, looking at the types of authority, this is what you normally look at. Types of authority. Types of authority. Number one, you normally talk of official authority and personal authority. So we normally talk of official authority and talk of what? Personal authority. Personal authority. So we normally look at official authority and personal authority. Two different forms of authority. I know by now, the moment you know the definition of authority, we can clearly differentiate between these two types of authority. That is official authority and personal authority. So maybe if Mwalimu can ask you guys, in the event that you're told to define official authority, what can you say? If you're told to say, define the term official authority, what will click at the back of our mind anytime you're looking at official authority? A very good question that you must think about it, right? So, official authority ideally is the authority which gives the manager power to command his subordinates by virtue of his designation in the organization. Of course, I repeat that definition, which is very good. You are saying that the authority which gives the manager power to command his subordinates by virtue of his designation, by virtue of his designation in the organization. That is what you're terming it as what? Official authority. What about personal authority? It indicates the ability by which a person influences the behavior of other persons in an organization. So this comes with position. This comes with the ability by which a person influences the behavior of other persons in an organization. You'll find that ideally we could be having, and ideally it always depends on the characteristics, the character of an individual, right, within an organization. This is by the virtue of the position that I'm holding in an organization. That's why you're talking of designation. Personal authority, ideally you're looking at it as a form of what? Ability of any other person to influence the actions of another person without necessarily probably having higher position than him or her. So ideally these are the two main types of what? Two main types of authority that you normally talk about. These are the two types of authority that we normally talk about. Now, another concept, this was our concept number one. Concept number two is upon us to understand what responsibility is. What responsibility is. What responsibility is. Responsibility. 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 That is also another key concept that we must always know. This is another key concept that we must always be having at the back of our mind. So, what is responsibility? We normally say in a simple terms that responsibility is the obligation of an individual. Obligation of an individual, whether a manager or any other employee of the organization, to carry out the tasks or duty assigned to him by the senior. We are saying that responsibility is the obligation of an individual, whether a manager or any other employee, or any other employee, or any other employee of the organization to carry out the task, or duty assigned to him by the senior, So ideally you are looking at it as my obligation. If I am an accountant employed, probably as a tax accountant, it will always be my responsibility to make sure that the company is always compliant to issues to do with matters of tax. If I'm employed as an account receivable, it will always be my responsibility to make sure that the collections have been done as at when they are supposed to be done. If I am assigned a duty of being an accounts payable, I must always make sure that all the creditors are paid as per when the time is due. So you'll find that ideally the concept behind responsibility is all about performing the task that we are assigned to do. Meaning that you are looking at it as a form of what? We are looking at it as a form of performing the task or duty that I'm supposed to do. So on this note, you'll find that there we will be having a very clear distinction. We are going to have a very clear distinction between authority and responsibility. So in the event that you're told to differentiate between authority and responsibility, what can we note? So we have point of differences. We have authority. And we have responsibility. So we are talking of point of differences, authority, and we have responsibility here. So in the event that we are told to differentiate between authority and responsibility, this is what we must always have at the back of our mind before we look at power. So point of difference number one, we will be talking of what is known as what? We will be talking of what is known as, first of all, from the definition, right? From the definition, this is meaning. Clearly you can see that we have a clear distinction between authority and responsibility. Whereas in authority we say that it refers to the power or right attached to a particular job or designation to give orders, enforce rules, make decisions, and exact compliance. So we are looking at it here, authority, which in that case, I think we had mentioned it earlier on. We say that power or right inherent to a particular job or position to give orders, enforce rules, make decisions, obtain conformity, and all that, right? That is what you're terming it as what? As authority. Whereas under responsibility, we mention and say that this is a duty or obligation to undertake and complete a task satisfactorily. Duty or obligation to undertake and complete a task satisfactorily, as assigned by the senior or established by one's commitment or circumstances. So that is what you're terming it as what? As that is a responsibility. So we've looked at one of the difference as what? The meaning of the two. Talk of number two, you're talking of task, or rather talk of task of manager, task of manager, task of manager. Under authority, we normally say that this is a delegation of authority. This is delegation of authority, delegation of authority. Whereas on the other side of responsibility, we normally talk of assumption of responsibility. Assumption of responsibility. Assumption of responsibility. Assumption of responsibility. Then talk of the other point, we are looking at what? Flow. Looking at the flow being a point of difference. Of course, this is downward. Right? I'm giving instruction and this is upward. I'm adhering to the instructions given. Objective, point of difference number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. Point of difference, objective. Objective, what is objective? To make decisions and implement. 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 The other aspect of responsibility is to execute duties assigned by superior. This is to execute. To execute duties assigned by superiors. To execute duties assigned by superiors. Then duration of this continues for long period. Continues for long period. Continues for long period. Whereas the other one, you normally say end as soon as a task is accomplished. Ends as soon as a task is accomplished. Ends as soon as a task is accomplished. So basically, my good students will find that these are amongst the difference between authority and responsibility. These are amongst the difference between authority and responsibility. Now, you'll find that these questions are very common in exams, which ideally they are highly tested. They are highly tested. So we can look at our last part, which in this case, our last part will be talking of what is known as what? Power. What is power? Because remember we said that we're talking of authority, responsibility, and power. So when you're asked to define what power is, what can we say? A very interesting part, which in this case, I want us to handle it in the next session because it's also somehow wide. Thank you so much, and let us meet in the next session.